having undertaken for the glory of God and for the advancement of the Christian faith, in honour of our king and country, a voyage to plant the first colony, do by these present, in the presence of God, a covenant, as shall be thought to the general good of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience. The year of our Lord, 1620. Oh, 1620. Well, happy 400th birthday to the Mayflower Compact. British citizen was expected to attend the Church of England, and those who didn't were punished by the state. One group of farmers in northern England wanted to worship God in their own way, so they wanted to separate from the Church of England. They are known as the Separatists, or more commonly, the Pilgrims. They felt the Protestant Church of England was still too Catholic-y, with its kneeling and incense and archbishops. The Pilgrims began to worship in secret, knowing full well that it was treasonous. The Separatists first fled to the Netherlands, but while life in Holland was peaceful, it was hard for them to find jobs, and it simply wasn't English. And the Separatists feared that their children were losing their native culture. You see, they still wanted their children to be English, and they didn't like that they were now speaking some Dutch on the side. So they decided that the only way to live as true English Christians was to separate even further and establish their own colony in the New World. They bargained and paid for passage across the Atlantic Ocean. When the Pilgrims set sail on a boat called the Mayflower in 1620, they intended to land in northern Virginia, but after storms drove their ship off course, the settlers landed in Massachusetts instead, way outside of Virginia's jurisdiction. Knowing life without laws could prove catastrophic, colonist leaders created the Mayflower Compact to ensure a functioning social structure would prevail. The compact was a set of rules for self-governance, where they bound themselves to follow, quote, just and equal laws. It was the first document to establish self-government in the New World. Since this was the first written framework for government in the U.S., it's kind of a big deal. The Pilgrims, led by Bradford, arrived in New England in December. Since they had the good fortune to arrive 6 weeks before winter and the good sense not to bring very much food with them or any farm animals, well, roughly half of the 102 passengers on the Mayflower died that first winter from starvation, exposure, and disease. The only reason they didn't all die was that local Indians, led by Squanto, gave them food and saved them. With the help of the native Wampanoag people, the Pilgrims learned to fish and farm their new lands. A year later, grateful that they had survived mainly due to the help of the alliance with the local Indians, the Pilgrims held their famous feast of Thanksgiving, attended by the natives and the Pilgrims in 1621. That is the story of the first American Thanksgiving, but it won't be an American holiday until Abraham Lincoln will make it one in the middle of the American Civil War. Now, let's look at the Puritans. There is a difference between Puritans and Pilgrims. While the Puritans did not call themselves Puritans, other people called them that. They referred to themselves as Congregationalists because they thought congregations should determine leadership and worship structures, not bishops. While the Separatists believed that the only way to live according to biblical teachings was to leave the Church of England entirely, the Puritans thought they could reform the church from within. So you can say the Puritans were purifying the church. They wanted their new society to be like a city on a hill, a metaphor stating that they wanted their society to be a model for everybody. The Puritans, led by John Winthrop, already had some money and saw a favorable investment opportunity by owning land in the Americas. The Puritans also believed that being far away from England, they could create the ideal English church. Unlike the Pilgrims, the Puritans never attempted to befriend the local native people. But this city on a hill metaphor is the basis for one kind of America exceptionalism. The idea that America is so special and so godly that they would be a model for other nations, at least according to Winthrop, as we act together. Puritans fought for equality, but it's not the equality in today's sense of the term. The only people who could vote or hold office were church members. And to be a church member, you had to be a visible saint. And you had to be male. They did believe equality meant that everyone should have the opportunity to read the Bible. And parents were punished if they were not properly instructing their children and making sure that they knew how to read. So let's see if we can keep the Pilgrims and the Puritans straight. The Pilgrims arrived in Plymouth in 1620, and the Puritans arrived in 1630. And in just 10 years, the Massachusetts Bay Colony was a Puritan stronghold of 20,000, while Plymouth was home to just about 2,500 Pilgrims. It didn't take long for the Plymouth Colony to fully absorb them into Massachusetts Bay Colony. While the Pilgrim Society and way of life fizzled out, the Puritans will be the ones making the laws in Massachusetts, and we will continue to talk about them next week, and what happens to those who dissent from the Puritan way of life, like Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson, and how their society can quickly deteriorate in the Salem witch trials. See you next week.
The Pilgrims sailed the sea to find a place to call their own. In their ship Mayflower, they hoped to find a better home. They finally knocked on Plymouth Rock, and someone said, "We're there." It may not look like home, but at this point I don't care.